All that stuff on the line as we bring in our guy Manny Navarro from The Athletic, who covers the Canes. And man, Manny, I mean, Miami's played in a lot of big games, historically, but this feels like one of the biggest ones in a while, considering everything they got on the line here this weekend.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, this is only the second time since they joined the conference that they've reached double-digit wins. And you think about the history of Miami, winning 5 national championships, all the great players they put in the NFL. For this to be just the second time since they joined the league in 2004 to be at double-digit wins tells you that they haven't been in this many big games in a while.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's asking this team to be like the 0-1 Canes. That's not a fair comparison to any team in any year in the country. But when you eye test this Miami team, Manny, how good are they? How legit is this team?
Well, people can criticize their schedule and say, well, they don't have any technically ranked wins, right? Nobody in the top 25 of the CFP anyway rankings. But the reality is they're averaging 41 points a game as an offense, which is number one in the offense against FBS winning teams, and they're 5-1 against FBS winning teams. So it's not like they're playing a bunch of chumps. These are teams that they're all probably going to make bowl games, and they're scoring against them. And last week, the defense looked like they kind of got their act together a little bit in the second half against Wake Forest. And, if you look at them statistically, defensively for the season, they're not bad. They're just not elite. And so they have an elite offense. They've got a decent defense, especially when they get after the quarterback. And they got a good team. And to be 10-1 at this point of the season, there's not a lot of teams out there that are 10-1.
No, there are not. And I think it happens the same as the case for Syracuse this season. The Orange, I would say, have had the better quarterback in every game they've played so far. I'm sure Miami would say the same thing going up to this point. How much has been on Cam Ward this year, and how much has he elevated this team?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, just the belief, to know that you're in every ball game because you've got that number one back there, right? He can score, he can lead you from a 25-point deficit in the second half at Cal on the road, and engineer all that kind of offense and score on 4 or 5 straight possessions. That gives you a belief as a team that you can do anything. And so, he's completely transformed the program. I think. As much credit as Ward deserves. I think Mario Cristobal, this is year 3 for him, and he took a lot of slack, right, for the first 2 years and not doing a good enough job. But he was recruiting his tail off, and a lot of the guys that he recruited his first 2 years have turned into quality players. And so between the work they did in the portal, the work they did on the recruiting trail, I think Cam Ward and Mario Cristobal both deserve a tip of the hat.
Yeah, and I guess that's obviously Cam's been fantastic this year. That kind of goes without saying with the season he's had. But obviously this is his last go around. How strong do you feel the foundation is that Cristobal has built? So this is not we got a glimpse of the old you, but it was a one and done situation.
Yeah, I think college football is in a really interesting position now, right? With the 12-team playoff and the transfer portal and just the era that we're in now. You can see how you can go from being Florida State one year at 13-0 to a 2-win team the next. So I think it's really important that you continue to recruit at an elite level. And that's one thing I think when you look at Miami and Florida State, who've been longtime rivals, Mike Norvell was not recruiting at the same level Mario Cristobal was in terms of bringing in high school talent, especially on the offensive and defensive line. And so, to me, that's the difference between Miami and Florida State, for instance, and why I think Miami has more staying power, because they have invested a good portion of their NIL money into getting high school players to come to Miami and to be a part of the program. And so I think, that's why I think this has a little bit more lasting power. But there's no question they got to replace that quarterback, and unless somebody comes in and plays as good as Cam Ward, I don't think they'll be 10-1 next year.
That is Syracuse will be facing the same thing in the offseason. That is one of the big X factors in college football these days, with these portal quarterbacks moving all over hell and gone every year. And Manny, I know you cover recruiting a lot, and you mentioned the NIL for the offensive and defensive line there. How strong is Miami NIL right now? We heard a lot about what John Ruiz in the opening years. That's not quite as much now, from my understanding. I could be wrong. How strong is the Miami NIL game right now?
Well, I think it's one of the best top 10 in the country, certainly. I think the amount of money that they've spent, raising money, and Ruiz was a big part of it in the early going, but I know within the last year or two, he's really been phased out of that process in terms of others stepping in and donating. But, I think this is, people talked about Ohio State and their $20 million roster, and, God knows how much money Ole Miss spent to get all the kids that they brought into the SEC, but I think this is a probably $20 million budget as well,
wow.
Between Cam Ward, some of those high school players that they've signed. I think that's kind of what you have to pay to be a program that has a top 10, top 15, playoff contending roster. You can do it other ways, certainly. Boise State is not spending $20 million on their roster, but I think if you're at a Power 4 program and you want to be a legitimate contender for elite recruits, you got to spend the money, and Miami's certainly doing that now.
And, Manny, I look at Miami here. Obviously, if they win, they're in the ACC title game against SMU. If not, it's Clemson. I'm not, who knows how this is going to work out here in the next week when it comes to the college football playoff. But how important would it be to the league here, do you think, for everybody, if somehow two of these teams can get into the playoff instead of what I guess we had been assuming for the last month or so that only one would make it?
Yeah, I think certainly for the ACC and its reputation, I think it's important to get more than one team in there. I know prior to the season, Brett Yormark over with the Big 12 was saying, hey, we're the third best conference. And yet you look at it realistically, it's the ACC or just a bunch of, Big 10 and SEC teams that are going to be getting in, plus a Big 12 team and a group of 5 teams. So I think the ACC is the third best conference right now. And I think SMU, Miami, and even Clemson, you could say, has somewhat of an argument to be one of the 12 best teams.
Yeah, Clemson, they got a chance to press that argument here this week with South Carolina coming up. That's a pretty big non-conference game, all things considered, with the new thing. And I guess that's what's fun about this time of the year, right? Like, not that game wouldn't have mattered in years past, Manny, but like a Clemson, South Carolina would have mattered to them in years past. It would have had no effect on all this. This year, it may affect like the last team that gets in the playoff or something like that.
Yeah, and certainly conference reputation, right? I mean, if Clemson wins that game and beats a South Carolina team that a lot of SEC folk are saying is certainly deserving of a playoff spot, I think it bodes well for the league. So certainly I think all of these games matter now. League reputation matters. And so we didn't have that before, right? When it was the 14, we certainly didn't have it before the 14. So college football's become a lot more interesting.
We got Manny Navarro from The Athletic here. All right, we've talked Cam Ward. Let's get into some of the other guys here. Like, you can be a great quarterback if you don't have someone to throw the ball to. It doesn't really matter a whole ton. Xavier Ross, he's the real deal, right?
He is. He's certainly one of the best receivers in the country. A guy who did it all through a lot of hard work and grit. Wasn't the fastest, certainly not the biggest, but a guy who has really become one of the best route runners, I think, in the sport, and a guy who just knows how to find space in the secondary and to get comfortable and to make the catch and make difficult catches. We've seen him do that routinely. Catch balls on his back on fourth down to help Miami come back and win games. He is one of the best in the country in my mind, no doubt. Yeah,
it feels every week you're seeing a highlight or two from him. And then you got Damien Martinez. You talk about the portal, the running back that comes in from Oregon State. How has he fit in? I know he's not the only guy, but he certainly seems to be the lead guy running the football this year.
Yeah, Damien is kind of the power back, the guy that they go to when they've got, a 2nd and 5 or a 3rd and 3 and they want to run the football or run a little wrinkle, a swing pass out to the outside and get him in space. He is consistent, but you're right. There are other guys. I think last week, for fans who haven't been following Miami all season, Jordan Lyle, he's one of the best freshmen in the country. Just hasn't played a lot because he's got a junior and sophomore in front of him that are really, really good. Mark Fletcher being the sophomore. So, but he exploded for over 100 yards rushing on 7 touches. You go back to the USF game, he scored on was like an 80-yard touchdown run late in that game. And so to me, they've got 3 guys that can take it to the house at any minute that are really explosive. But Martinez is very, very reliable.
Yeah, and obviously, in Miami, we're talking offense most of the time. They're putting up a bajillion points every game. Historically, we think a lot of these great defenders that come out of the Canes. Anyone on defense popping to you? Like, has the NFL got eyes on these guys, or is it not quite that level of the Canes we know from the past?
Yeah, I think that's the one side of the football. When you look at who their best players are, they're usually the younger guys, the 1st and 2nd year guys. I mean, Mario Cristobal went out in the portal and brought in Kiko Mauino at linebacker and Mish Powell from Washington, who was on the national runner-up team last year, who was a starter for them. He's one of their starting safeties. But really, the guys who I think are going to be playing on Sundays are the Reuben Baines of the world, who's in his second year. He's finally getting healthy and playing better. Defensive end, you look at cornerback, O.J. Frederick, a true freshman who's put up some of the best numbers in the country. Those are the guys that I think are the Sunday players, but certainly some quality veterans that have come in through the transfer portal that help.
All right, yeah, that's the tale of the recruiting that you're telling us about Mario here and what he's done over the last few years. And for those that don't know, Manny, you also cover recruiting a lot in the college football landscape. Man, it snuck up on me. Like I knew they had moved the signing date, but I didn't realize it until like 2 hours ago. I'm like, oh crap, that's literally next Wednesday. How is this puzzle going to fit together? Where regular season ends, signing day, then you've got conference championship games, portal opens, playoff. Like how is this all going to go down here in the next month?
It really is going to be nuts because, first of all, the transfer portal window is only 20 days, but most of these coaches know by now who's going to be leaving their team at the end of the regular season or have already left and just start playing with the team anymore. So they know pretty much how many spots they need to fill up. They have a certain number of high school recruits that they're looking to add, and then obviously the transfer portal, right? And who do I need? Where do I need veteran help? Where do I need to bring guys in? The way I describe this, and I covered the NBA for several years in Major League Baseball as well in my career. This is like having an NBA summer in the middle of the playoffs. That's basically what's going on here the next few weeks. It's just nutty, and I wish college football would figure out a way to get the calendar straightened out, but you really can't because classes start in January and kids got to be this is still school related. So it is what it is, but it will be wacky and wild the next few weeks.
Yes, they do indeed tell us this still has something to do with school, so we got to get into class next semester. And I guess, Manny, you know this. I mean, everyone's recruiting staff has exploded. It's almost like, some schools literally do have a position called GM, so they're almost setting up these front offices. Like, if you're a guy like Cristobal, though, like, you got to manage this whole operation. Say Miami's in the league title game next week. Like, how do you handle that week with all that stuff when you're the head guy and you've got to put all those ducks in a row here leading up to your biggest game of the season?
Well, that's why you spend a lot of money on personnel, and certainly Miami has done that. I will tell you the one thing Mario cares about probably more passionately than everything else is high school recruiting. Mm-hmm. So that matters to him. He says that's the lifeblood of the program. He's old school like that. And so he will turn the focus to signing day on Wednesday, and if Miami's lucky enough to get to Charlotte and get past Syracuse this week, he will then turn right back around and coach football. It really is, college football, I try to tell people this all the time, being a head college football coach and dealing with all of these things is unlike anything else in sport. The amount of pressure to manage your roster, to concentrate on winning, it is like nothing else in sports for sure.
Yeah, there's really no good way to prepare to take over a job like that. You can watch it all you want. It's a whole different world when you got that chair. All right, lastly, Manny, you mentioned the game Saturday. What do you think happened Saturday, Cuse and the Canes in the Dome this week?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great football game. I think Syracuse is going to be very capable of pulling the upset in this game. Miami has, like I said, they're 5-1 against teams with winning records, so it's not like they haven't been tested or had to go and play on the road in some tough places. They won at Louisville. In Louisville, I know they lost to Stanford, but they're still a good team. So I think Miami is ready for this. I think the Hurricanes win by a field goal, survive, and get to the ACC championship game. I think Cam Ward hasn't played his best necessarily the last couple of weeks compared to the way he was playing earlier in the season. I know he's super focused and driven to get Miami to the conference championship game, and I think one way or another Miami will win this game by a field goal and survive. All
right. Well, I'm rooting for a different outcome, but I'm with you, Manny. I think it's going to be an electric game on Saturday. I just think it's going to be a fun. You got two quarterbacks. I think they're going to be going back and forth at each other all game long. It should be a fun one for all of us to take in on Saturday. All right, man. Thanks as always for hopping on. Happy Thanksgiving to you, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. But thanks so much.